Guys, our perfect espresso extraction is designed around a recipe that we've created. So we spend a lot of time with the roasting team here. We look at the origins of the coffee that we use and the way to accentuate and profile all of those coffees. That all then focuses in on the recipe that we use, okay? All coffee is unique and the recipe is always about being very specific to get the right flavor. Our recipe for this Guru blend is 22 grams of coffee in. That's our dose. 48 grams of espresso extraction out. So that's liquid, 48 grams. And we have a time that we try and use to measure that to make sure that we're in the right flow. So our target time is between 27 and 30 seconds, okay? Now that will give us the right balance of flavor, so that's super important. 22 grams of coffee in, 48 grams of liquid espresso out in about 27 to 30 seconds. The reason that we weigh and the espresso extraction is measured by weight is because when you extract coffee, you get the crema. The crema is the caramel color on top of the espresso. Now that's the caramelization of the natural sugars in the coffee. That can fluctuate in height. So when people used to do it by mils, they would get variances there. So now we do it by weight, okay? So, got my portafilter. It's important to always keep the portafilter clean and dry, okay? We don't want any moisture in there that will start to dissolve the coffee once it goes in, okay? I'm using a dosing cup here. I'm dosing. I'm using my scales. Now this one's come out at 20.2. So for the sake of this, I've just got a small pre-amount of ground coffee just to add in. So I've got my 22 grams of coffee. Now I just want to distribute that quickly before I tamp to have a relatively even bed of coffee, and then I'm going to tamp. I won't use a puck press, I'm going to use a hand tamp. I think places still use hand tamps. Now the idea of it is to hold it like a motorcycle grip, and you want to keep the lugs or the spouts of the coffee portafilter off the bench. If you're sitting on a bench, you're going to pick up loose coffee grind, and that will then run with the coffee into the cup, so we don't want that. So I'll just lean in and provide pressure. Now once that's pressed down, it's not going to go any further, so I just press it until it's firm. If I need to tap it, I'll just tap it with the side of my hand, and then just to finish, okay? And that gives me a nice level, even bed of coffee before I extract, okay? I purge my group head to make sure there's no previous coffee sitting on there. Just to demonstrate, I'm going to use a set of scales here. So once I go in, I'm using scales to show. I've got this button programmed, and I'm starting my timer. So I don't want the coffee to come out too quickly. I want it to be nice and slow to start with and slowly build speed, but I want it to be nice and even, giving me good color, good richness in the pour. And I'm sitting about there, and my time around 27, 28. So that's my perfect espresso extraction. So 22 grams of coffee into the handle, 48 grams of liquid out, and about that sort of 27 to 30 seconds. Now I know that my coffee extraction is perfect, and the base of all my coffees, the flavor is going to be right. So guys, I just wanted to cover off a couple of those variables when we're extracting the coffee. So those three variables we mentioned, the dose, the grind, and the tamping. As I explained, the tamping compresses the coffee. It actually makes very little effect to how the coffee flows. The biggest variable is the dose of the coffee. Now, if I've got a target time of between 27 and 30 seconds, and my recipe is 22 grams of coffee, 1 gram of coffee, more or less, can equate to about 8 seconds variance in our extraction time. So that's why it's really important when you're setting your coffee throughout the day and in the morning that you lock in that dose of 22 grams, because when you're busy, if you start pumping out coffee, if you start dosing a little bit under, and you see this a lot in the cafes when people will sort of be going like this, they'll grind coffee and they kind of sweep little bits off. they tamp, and then they go to extract. What happens is 1 gram of coffee, more or less, is about 8 seconds. So if you're looking at a 28-second extraction, and instead of dosing 22 grams, you dose only 21 grams, your extraction is going to fall to like 22, 23 seconds. Now, so it can trip you up. So that's why it's really important to lock away that variable. Using scales is a good tool to calibrate, and then you can start to roll. The other one that I wanted to quickly mention was the grind. So the grind is obviously the particle size. It's how quickly the water flows through, okay? So I've got a couple of examples here. So this is an espresso grind. So it's really fine, but when I feel it, it's still got a little bit of texture to it. It's almost like a mix of a salt and pepper or a sort of sand. And I know that that's really good. It's going to be nice and slow when the water comes through, and that's my espresso grind. The alternative to that, you can see, hopefully you can see. So this is a coarse grind. You can start to see little flecks of white. That's the husk of the coffee bean. Now, quite often when I'll go to cafes and I'll look at the extraction, I can see the grind is too coarse. So straight away then, I know that the coffee's going to taste too sour, the water's going to run through it too quickly, and it feels noticeably coarse to feel. The last thing I want to show you is when the grind is too fine. Now you can see this is almost like flour or an icing sugar, okay? So obviously the water is just not going to pass through, and that's where instead of taking 28 seconds to extract, it's going to take 2 days. So it's just, that's where you're getting the grind setting is really, really important, okay? So those are the 3 things: the grind, the dose, the tamping. Calibrate those things, follow that recipe, and you'll be bang on with your extractions.